So what you're saying is I don't need a $5,000 camera, right? I can use a $200 camera or a $300 camera? How do I do that? So I get a lot of messages about what camera should I use and the specs that I need to look for. I mean, those are good questions to ask, but you need to make sure that you have the right camera for the specific project. It's not a blanketed statement, but generally a specific camera would fit a specific need for your film / video, whatever. So I realize whilst I'm editing this, you need to make sure that you watch the whole thing, because if you take this out of context, you're going to make mistakes and I'm going to get roasted for nothing in the comments. So make sure you watch the whole thing, and then you'll have some context to the experiment and to understanding why having a $5,000 camera isn't necessary, or even a $1,000 camera. And then once you've watched the video, then you can go and roast me in the comments. I appreciate that. You don't necessarily need the same camera for everything, which is why in the past I've rented a lot of my gear. For the short film Regret that I did, I rented the 1DX Mark II, and then for the film before that, the I Love You More film, which got almost 12 million hits online, I used a Canon T3i, which I still have that thing. Where did I put it? Yeah, this thing. This is what I used. The Canon T3i. I didn't use, what's this, the Rokinon 1.5 35mm. I used the standard kit lens. The 18 to 55. I mean, that's a very cheap lens, but I used that, and I used this camera, and I used a Ronin M, the smaller brother to the Ronin, the DJI products. And I mean, the film got a lot of traction. A lot of people saw it. I still get to this day lots of messages about how people's lives were touched by it and different stuff like that. So I watched a video from Unbox Therapy, Lou, the guy who hosts the show. He was talking with Marques Brownlee. You may know him as well. I'll link the video down in the description. You can check out the video that I'm going to refer to, but we're going to take a look real quick on what Lou says. There are a couple things that I want to address, and I think he got a lot of stuff right.
So while I've got you here, I wanted to talk about this. I had to talk about this. This is the blind smartphone camera test video that you did. Couple million views on it. A lot of people talking about it. I saw people talking about it on Twitter and so on. Yeah. And I mean, the basic idea, the premise here is a bunch of photos. You don't tell anyone which smartphone camera they were shot on, and then you ask people, hey, which ones look the best?
Didn't quite go that way.
And that's actually why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening in this experiment here is that the results are not what anyone expected them to be.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's reasons for that. I mean, I immediately had my speculation on why that might be the case. In the video, you actually talk about it a little bit. But ultimately, I mean, we're going to kind of spoil the video a little bit here.
Yeah.
But some phones make it through this bracket that have no business, in most people's minds, making it through the bracket.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
And this experiment that Marques performed and the conversation that Lou and Marques are having is very interesting, because the people didn't really pick necessarily every time the sharpest, the best looking. They just chose the one with the colors that looked most natural.
People generally fell towards voting for the brighter, more saturated, more vivid one, even though the highest end, best smartphone cameras we traditionally know as, you know, the iPhone and the Pixel, don't do the brightest, vivid, most crazy photos. They do sort of more neutral, more adjustable, gradable, higher dynamic range photos, which didn't win.
Obviously, with some different cameras, if they have a higher dynamic range, there would usually be less contrast. So the shadows would be brighter and the brights would actually be a little darker, so the image kind of matched a bit more, so you had a lot more freedom in post when you're editing. And so with cameras, or at least the phones that had this feature, a lot of people chose the unedited, like I think these were unedited. I'm not 100% sure if Marques did any editing with them. I'm pretty sure he didn't. And so people chose the images in the phones that actually had a less of a dynamic range. So that dynamic range was the darks were darker and the brights were brighter. And people chose that because of the vibrance of the colors, and not necessarily because the image was sharper or better looking. Obviously, if you're using your phone these days, quality isn't going to matter as much as it should with like a computer screen or a TV.
The interesting thing for me about this experiment, this video, was it brings into question the idea of good in general. Who gets to decide which is better? It's not strictly this is a higher resolution photo, it's which one do you like better was the way it was positioned. And so when people went and picked phones that typically wouldn't beat, you know, like let's say the Pocophone against the iPhone 10, or the BlackBerry beats the 10s, like on paper, no one's supposed to pick that, but blindly they do.
People use their phones to consume most of the entertainment or content that they consume. And so quality isn't a huge thing at the moment, even though there's so much talk about it. Marquez records his videos in 4K or 8K and uploads them like that, and he calls it overkill, and it's right, but he has a reason for it. He's looking for longevity for the future when people do need that quality and it's there. He's going to stand out from most people. But at the same time, if you can't afford it, don't go for it, because people aren't going to notice. They're not going to care as well. People are just going to make sure that obviously you don't want to watch a 120p video with everything being grainy and stuff, but you want to make sure, I mean, 720p is decent on a phone. No one's going to really notice. I don't even notice. And I'm a filmmaker and I like quality stuff.
So on my computer, when I'm looking at the full resolution, because we basically like crop the two and put the top and the bottom next to each other. So I'm looking at the original files next to each other. Original files, I picked the higher end expected winner every time.
Right.
But then I put them on Instagram stories and I forgot about the letters and I tested myself. And I voted for the crowd favorites, the upsets, more often than not.
And so this brings up the question, do you really need an expensive camera, or do you really need 4K? Well, one way that I would say yes, you do need it is if you're going to maybe do a feature film or something that's higher end where you need that quality so that if you want to zoom in, you can without any quality loss. At the same time, if you're doing a film, you kind of want good quality because people are usually going to be watching that on a TV screen or usually a larger screen than a phone. So that could be an option. But at the same time, it's not 100% necessary because, again, people use their phones to consume a lot of their media and content. So HD at the moment is fine. I mean, you shouldn't worry about it. It's not a huge deal right now. Or people make it a huge deal, or they pretend to be a huge deal when really it's not.
You gotta know what you want out of it. If all you want is to take a photo that's good enough for Instagram or Twitter, literally any of those phones will be fine. And I think that's what I learned, because I wouldn't have even wanted...
Every phone is an Instagram phone.
It's hard to find a really, truly bad phone nowadays. Right. But I think if you also value that, like, well, you know, Apple's running a Shot on iPhone contest where you can share your original images to be put on a billboard. Like, if you care about seeing them on as a wallpaper on your computer, or you want a little more detail or a little extra finesse for things like that, then you're actually looking at the top couple instead of just whatever looks fine on Instagram.
And so keep in mind that these don't necessarily apply just to phones. These could apply to cameras of all kinds, small DSLRs, cinematic cameras, camcorders, you know, all kinds of stuff. There's some good camcorders out there right now. It's all kinds of stuff. The more professional DSLRs better than this kind. This is what, 500, 400 bucks, even if it's 400 bucks. But I've been using this for years, 5.5 years now, and I really have no complaints about it, because a huge part of what good image is your lens. I have the Rokinon 1.5 35mm lens, and man, it's a beast. It's beautiful. The image quality is amazing. You've seen the tutorials on my channel. That's what I use. This is 95% of the time I'm using this lens. I might pull out my Nifty 50, the f1.8 I think it is, and it's really great. That's like $100 lens. I'll link it down below if you're interested in it. But lenses are very important for your cameras. It's not just the camera. The lens is also a huge part of it. So you don't need a $5,000 camera. Proven by Marquez. It's not just solely based on phones, it's also cameras. And so I hope that helped you guys kind of decide a bit more about if you're deciding to get a camera, to kind of help you decide if you really do need 4K or if it's more of a want. Some people do need it and some people do prefer it. So it depends on what your budget is, it depends on what you need. I hope that was helpful for you guys. If it was, consider subscribing. I am going to be making more in the future. This is kind of the content I create, and editing, visual effects as well. So if that's your thing, consider sticking around. Leave a like, that would also really help the channel out. But remember, until next time, keep smiling, keep shooting.